What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. The history the government hopes you never learn. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show. It's Wednesday, February 14th, 2018, Hump Day, middle of the weekday. It's also Valentine's Day. It's also Ash Wednesday, and Claire's over at her church right now. And I'm feeling a lot better today. Yesterday I was kind of off, and I found out after I did the show, I was actually running a fever, so I had some kind of a bug, but it's gone this morning, and so I'm back to my normal, obnoxious, annoying, and irritating self here. All right, let's get right on into it. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, making sure that we stay on the air, and that may be a challenge today because if you're watching on the YouTube feed, you can see how very dark it is here. We're under like a major thunderstorm, and because we're on a ridge line, we tend to get lightning strikes, but hopefully we'll be able to get through 3 hours of radio without being interrupted again, as we were last time. Obviously, the big story right now in the media, there's been a shooting at a Florida high school, at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland. Multiple victims, at least 20 injured, multiple deaths, terrible tragedy, obviously. And, of course, the gun grabbers are just ecstatic. Oh, we've got dead bodies to wave at people. We've got dead bodies to wave at people and take their guns away. And, of course, my response to that is, what a shame that none of those teachers were carrying a weapon. Because that'd only be one dead person instead of however many they are, and they haven't actually announced what that is. They've already identified the shooter as one of the students there. Now, the part that's really kind of weird is the FBI is now on site. And if you understand the rules of jurisdiction, there's a big question mark about that. FBI has jurisdiction over federal buildings, federal property, and crimes that go across state lines. And given that the local police have already identified the shooter, you kind of wonder, why is the FBI there? And in light of some of the things that we now know the FBI has been up to, one has to wonder if this is just another one of these staged incidents to push the gun grabber agenda, or at least give the media a reason not to report on Obamagate. But they're basically going through the exercise. The students are marching across the street onto the athletic field, and it's a big show. All right, getting into the news here. Over on the Olympics, Shaun White won a gold medal for snowboarding, and it's the 100th Winter Olympics gold medal in U.S. history. They're not doing a count of how many medals the U.S. is actually winning, but they're going to say it's our 100th medal. Are we not really wonderful and great? Yeah. Unfortunately, the USA men's hockey team lost to Slovenia, so a little bit of a downside. And interesting that there are all these articles about how every time an Olympian wins a medal, they get a tax bill. And I found this article. This is actually from 2016. And it says, congrats, you won a gold medal. Here's your tax bill. And they basically say the U.S. Olympic Committee, they give out the medals, and the athletes get taxed on them. But there's a problem. And that is, of course, the medals aren't really silver, bronze, and gold. The last time they actually handed out solid gold medals was the Olympics in Stockholm, Sweden in 1912. Olympic gold medals are made primarily from silver and then plated with a minimum of 6 grams of gold. And I actually learned this firsthand because I did some consulting for the Bishop Museum, and I got to see a display of Duke Kahanamoku's Olympic medals. And it was very obvious they were plated, and they actually had deteriorated quite a bit. Now, South Korea has done something very generous. They are picking up the tab for all of the North Korean Winter Olympic delegation. This is basically, they're thumbing their nose at the sanctions. And it's basically about 2 million pounds sterling. I don't know what that is in U.S. dollars without grabbing out my calculator, but it's basically 424 North Koreans came down to be in the games. South Korea is picking up the tab. Now, there's an article out of Russia Today about how the Koreans seem to be talking peace. The younger sister of Kim Jong-un has captured the attention of the media. Vice President Mike Pence is being mocked as a dud, even undiplomatic. And the two Koreas are moving together. And, of course, that is definitely not something the U.S. foreign policy people want to see happen. They want a war. They want another war. They want to make sure the One Belt, One Road doesn't come down into South Korea. Now, a lot of people have been talking about this portrait of Obama. And apparently there is some hidden symbology in there of a highly questionable nature. And you would think, this being a presidential portrait, this is going to be in the history books. You want it done right. And yesterday we were talking about how this artist had painted a series of paintings with black women slicing off the heads of white women. And the fact of the matter is he's not really a very good artist, but apparently his fame rests on the fact that he's black and he's gay and he's offensive from time to time. It turns out, though, that most of the actual work on his art is done in China, and most of it's done by Chinese artists that he hires on in at very low cost. So he's not even painting his own paintings. And yes, I know that artists throughout history have used assistants, but still, you could have found a much, much better artist. It's a terrible, terrible painting, both of Obama and Michelle. Doesn't even look like her. All right, we're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. Now, as you know, with this testimony of the heads of the intelligence agencies to Congress, they're ramping up the Russia bashing all over again. They're hard selling this. They're pushing this as hard as they can. As hard as they pushed Saddam has nuclear weapons. As hard as they were pushing Assad has sarin gas. And those others were lies, and this is more lies. And basically, story coming out of Blacklisted News, the attitude they're trying to put on out there is that anybody engaged in dissent is part of Russia's effort to undermine the midterm elections. So now they want to throw away the First Amendment right to air our grievances before the government and say that if you're not in agreement with us, you must be a Russian agent. We're getting a replay of McCarthyism all over again. And that was absolutely horrific. A lot of innocent people's lives were utterly destroyed with all this red baiting and hate Russia and hate the Soviet Union. And they're trying to play that same game all over again. Now, yesterday, Senator Mark Warner, he's one of the people pushing the Russian election hacking hoax. He was at that Senate Intelligence Committee. But here's where it gets interesting. Do you know that those DNC servers have never been examined forensically to see if Russia really did hack into it, or if in point of fact all those emails were copied to a flash drive by Seth Rich and leaked out to WikiLeaks? They've never been examined. The DNC refused. The FBI hasn't looked at them. The NSA hasn't looked at them. Nobody with any technical expertise has been allowed near those servers. But Mark Warner's going to be out there saying, well, it's obviously Russia hacked those servers. Who else could it be? Well, it could be Seth Rich. Remember, the timestamps on the files prove that the files were not copied off over the internet because they were copied too quickly. Obviously, on the internet, there is a maximum amount of bandwidth and data transfer that you can have, especially here in Hawaii under Spectrum. It's pretty poor. But with a USB 3 flash drive, you can copy stuff off almost instantly. But here's the important point to remember. The servers at the DNC have never been inspected to see if there's any evidence of Russia hacking. And probably they never will be, because the insiders already know Russia didn't hack those emails. It was an internal leak. Remember when they tried to blame the Sony leak on North Korea and it turned out to be a disgruntled employee. Now, there's an article over in the New York Post, and it's called Peeling Back the Layers of Hillary Clinton's Deceit, and it provides a really good summation of what's going on. And it's using the metaphor of an onion with layers to describe the process. Every layer you remove, you get closer to the truth. And so you're looking at the scandalous behavior of the FBI into their probe, whether Trump's campaign conspired with Russia. And one layer at a time, we're learning how flawed and dirty that probe was. One of the layers, of course, is that dodgy dossier. Then you have FBI Lisa Page and Peter Strzok. And basically, it is reasonable for all Americans to conclude the fix was in among then Director James Comey's team to hurt Trump and help Clinton. And that is a huge scandal. It's an absolute huge scandal. Now, apparently, a lot of people are starting to talk, and more information is coming on out from all of this. We're hearing a lot of whistleblowing going on. We're hearing rumors of another deep throat. But basically, at this point, every one of these claims about how Russia wanted to help Donald Trump and Russia was colluding with Donald Trump, there's no evidence for any of it. It's just a smear job, and they're desperate to keep it going because they understand that when the American people get sick and tired of the same lies being sold over and over again as breaking news, like we haven't already heard this a million times over the last year, the American people are going to say, all right, let's look at the real crimes. Let's look at Uranium One. Let's look at all of the strange and mysterious deaths around the Clintons, including that of Seth Rich. Let's look at all the pay-for-play that was going on. Let's look at what Clinton and Loretta Lynch really said on that tarmac. Now, Newt Gingrich has come on out and said in any reasonable system of law, Hillary Clinton would already be in jail. And he's absolutely right. Even James Comey admitted she committed felony violations of Title 18. Just the missing emails, the emails she destroyed, are a crime. If she was using her government email address for personal business, I'm sorry, those records have to be preserved. And remember, the NSA apparently has those missing emails, and they offered them to James Comey, and Comey refused. Did not want to see anything. And of course, now we have this bizarre memo, this email, that former National Security Advisor Susan Rice sent to herself right after the Trump inauguration, which appears to be a CYA, or in this case, cover the boss's rear end, to say, hey, we're playing by the rules. We're doing everything absolutely right. But basically, either former FBI Director Comey or former National Security Advisor Susan Rice is lying based on that email released by Senator Grassley. So one of them is guilty of perjury. Judge Napolitano was out there on Fox News with Martha McCallum saying that there's really only one person who could have told Susan Rice to write that email to herself, and that would be Barack Obama, in an effort to cover up Obama's role in the plot to sabotage President Trump. And that's exactly what's going on. Now, Donald Trump's attorney has come on out and said that the Susan Rice meeting, the secret meeting with Comey and Obama, took place one day before Comey briefed Trump on the dossier. So they were all there in the back room trying to figure out what they were going to do. So Obama was given the Russian dossier. This is coming from Tom Fitton over at Judicial Watch. Obama had the dossier. What did he know, and why has he not been called to testify about it? Now, when this whole dodgy dossier came on out, one of the first things I thought might happen would be the FISA judge would declare the warrants invalid because they were the product of fraud and deception. But apparently the judge in question, who is an Obama appointee, according to this, according to Representative Jim Hines, the FISA judge overseeing the warrants was fully aware that the dossier being used was a politically motivated hit piece paid for by Hillary and the Democratic National Committee. The judge knew. He's crooked. He's corrupt. They're all criminals inside Washington, D.C., with precious, precious few exceptions. All right. Now then, let's see. Cher Blue writer found guilty of disorderly conduct for fighting with the police. He's trying to cover the Virginia Republican gubernatorial candidate and got into a scuffle there. Okay, let's talk about the wars and the war zones. Oh, we're getting an update from Parkland, Florida. Apparently they have the shooter in custody. And again, I'm wondering about why the FBI is there. That, to me, is grounds to suspect that this is not what we're being told it is. Getting on back to the wars. Earlier in the week, you heard this report about how this U.S. attack had killed hundreds of Russians. And Russia's foreign ministry has come on out and said, no, some Russian individuals have been killed, but not hundreds. And basically went on to say that the world's media has got to stop listening to the American corporate media because the American corporate media has become totally unreliable and untrustworthy. And boy, does he have our number on that one. He's basically saying there is no true and reliable information. Well, there is at Republic Broadcasting, and there is at whatreallyhappened.com. Virginia Senator Dick Black is warning that there will be an imminent false flag involving weapons of mass destruction in Syria, which we've heard from other sources as well, to justify a new U.S. incursion into Syria. Oh, Assad is gassing his people, or Assad is nuking his people, or he's using germs. But it's going to be a false flag for the simple reason Assad has nothing to gain by doing any of this stuff. Remember what I keep telling you. To find out if you're being lied to, look for what should be there and isn't. And what is missing in all of this propaganda is a reason for Assad to do any of these things, knowing that it would provide justification for the United States military to come on in and wreck some more real estate. Now, Dick Black is also saying that he thinks Hillary Clinton ordered the murder of the Libyan ambassador Christopher Stevens in order to cover up the weapons deals with Syrian al-Qaeda and ISIS forces. That whole Benghazi thing. Christopher Stevens was right there in the consulate. He was in a position to find out what was going on. Maybe he threatened to go public. But if Black is correct, he goes on the dead bodies list here. Story out of Blacklisted News, how the establishment propaganda machine gaslights us into submission. And it's basically talking about classic methods of propaganda, repeating over and over and over again the big lie tactic. And we've been seeing it for years now. We got to take a break here for some commercials, and we'll be back with more about this story after these words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. And I've just been informed by viewers, YouTube has apparently shut down my live stream. If you go to the link, it's a blank page. I just checked it myself. So that certainly ties in with what Michael Herzog was saying about how the corporate media is trying to shut down the independent media. So yeah, I'm getting all these emails from people saying I can't connect to your show. yeah, it does seem to be gone. And so I'm going to have to find yet another streaming system to get back on the air. Meanwhile, if you would like to help keep Republic Broadcasting on the air, and we really do need your help, I mean, it's getting serious. I mean, we're talking about a real possibility that we're not going to be here in a couple of months. So the postal address to send a check or money order is Republic Broadcasting Network, 2251 Double Creek Drive, number 302, Round Rock, Texas, 78664. The phone number, if you want to pledge to be a recurring subscriber, is 800-724-2719, extension 03. Okay. Yeah. All right, well, I got a lot of emails, and hopefully now they understand what's going on. YouTube just shut off my streaming link. The page is blank. It's just gone. Anyway, getting on back to propaganda, war propaganda, the Syria narrative. If so many people weren't being killed, it would actually be funny to consider the way they're flipping back and forth with all the stories. Assad is evil. No, Assad is okay. We're there to get ISIS and Al-Qaeda. But it really is just lie upon lie upon lie. And the sooner that Americans wake up and realize that, the extent to which we are being lied to by the corporate media and by the government. All right. Now, somebody just wrote on in and said over on InfoWars, there are already accounts posting, repeal the Second Amendment. It looks like they were ready for this event to happen. So, yeah, with the FBI involved, I'm starting to think this is another Sandy Hook. It's all over again. Now, speaking of hoaxes and propaganda, there's an article that came out of Moon of Alabama, and they actually, despite the name, they actually do a lot of really good work. Basically, Syrian authorities are now saying that the U.S. may have maneuvered things in Syria to be able to say we're firing in self-defense when they attacked Syrian government forces. In other words, the incident the U.S. cited as justification to go on and attack Syrian forces may not have actually happened. It was another setup. It was a staged incident. Now, SecDef Mattis is admitting there's no evidence that Assad ever used sarin gas. Now, it's great that he's coming on out and saying it, and I wish it would get more coverage in the corporate media. But, of course, it's no surprise to any of us who've been paying attention all along. No surprise at all. Okay, apparently there's been another incident where the Syrian Arab Army, in cleaning out some of these ISIS and Al-Qaeda, Al-Nusra hideouts, they're finding huge amounts of ammunition, weapons, artillery, mortars, mines, grenades. A lot of this stuff apparently coming from Israel. So that's one that part of their support structure here. Now, speaking of Florida and today's little event for the gun grabbers, apparently lawmakers in Florida are calling for New Zealand singer Lorde's upcoming concert to be canceled because of her support of BDS. And on Thursday, State Representative Randy Fine cited a Florida law that says no state or local government can conduct business exceeding $1 million with any organization engaged in a boycott of Israel. Now, Lorde canceled her show in Tel Aviv last year after an open letter called on her to support the BDS movement and show solidarity with the Palestinian people. Now, I have a message for State Representative Randy Fine. In fact, for the entire Florida government. You've got problems right in your own front yard. You've got the shooting today. You've got massive problems with your election system. We saw back in 2000. Your job is Florida. Your job is not Israel. And I hope the voters of Florida are going to realize that it's time to start voting out all these people who put the needs and desires of Israel above the needs and desires of the American people. That's what a state government is supposed to do, take care of that state. And I am getting sick and tired of all these politicians who are elected to state legislatures or Washington, D.C., running around saying, oh, we got to do this for Israel. We have to do that for Israel. That's not your job. That's not what we voted you to do. That's not what we pay you to do. Your job is this country. We'll be right back. Aloha America, welcome back to the show here. And apparently my channel is still there at YouTube. What is broken is there used to be one URL that would take you to the video, and apparently that doesn't work any longer. You have to go to the page and then click on today's live video, and you'll be able to see it. And on the next commercial break, I will update that link to get everybody so that they can find the video again. But apparently YouTube just took out that one link, and I don't know why, because it just makes it much more difficult for people to find the live streams. Let's see. Yeah, okay. I got to fix it. All right, getting on back to Israel. Apparently they do have one supporter. Caitlyn Jenner is out there railing against BDS. She, it is a proud defender of Israel. Okay. Now, up in New York City, there was a bookseller, and the store is called Book Culture. And apparently, some Israel supporters got very angry over the fact that this bookstore was carrying a book, children's book, P is for Palestine. And they got very upset because there's not supposed to be a Palestine. Remember, Golda Meir used to say, there's no Palestine. This is a land without a people for a people without a land. And, of course, that's ridiculous. I've done a whole page of artifacts from Palestine. People have been sending me in books and postcards and coins from Palestine. It's a real place. So, basically, there were threats of violence coming to this bookseller and demands to sign a statement repudiating boycott, divestment, and sanctions. And now, of course, getting from the other side, Columbia University Students for Justice in Palestine and Columbia Barnard Jewish Voice for Peace are reaffirming a call to boycott the bookseller unless it rescinds its statement against BDS. Look at all the trouble Israel's supporters are causing all over the place, because we refuse to see the world the way they demand that we see it. There is a Palestine. There's been a Palestine going back to biblical times. And the behavior of Israel's government is not very good. And we have every right to say that. Now, as you know, Trump has cut funding for the United Nations Relief and Works Agency in Palestine over the fact that the Palestinians were very upset over Trump's comment about recognizing Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. And as a result, the situation there is getting critical. Article coming out of Electronic Intifada, Gaza is essentially in a vice. And they've always been in a state of controlled starvation, because that's how Israel operates. They take the population of Palestine, they multiply it by the minimum number of calories to keep somebody alive, and that's how much food they allow into Gaza. All right, we're going to take a phone call. Don in the Philippines. Aloha, Don. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Mike. Yes, on the as far as the FBI nowadays, they just move in and say, "Okay, we're taking over." They're supposed to have a mandate if number one, if it's on federal property, for example, if it's a post office or something like that where the murders take place. Number two, if crossing state lines had something to do with it.
Yes.
Or number three, if the local authorities ask for their assistance. I think that last clause, they're asking for the assistance, but sometimes the FBI will call the guy and say, hey, you're asking for our assistance and we're going to go over there and take over. I think that's what happens a lot of the times.
Well, the FBI definitely pushes itself in places where it's not always wanted. But again, this is starting to feel like it's another Sandy Hook.
One of the first times that it happened where the FBI, the feds just trumped the local authorities was the Kennedy assassination, and the autopsy was supposed to take place right there in Texas by Texas state law. Anybody murdered there was, the autopsy had to take place in Texas. And the feds, the Texas authorities were right there. They're getting ready to grab the body and take it over to the coroner, but the FBI just said, get out of the way, we're taking this body to Washington. That's how they were able to do a lot of their hanky-panky on the Kennedy assassination.
Yeah, I mean,
and nowadays
they basically stole the body. There was absolutely no legal basis for the feds to remove the body from Texas and take it back to Washington, D.C. Now, after JFK's assassination was over and done with, Congress did pass a bunch of laws saying that if there's another assassination, it's our federal jurisdiction automatically. But at the time of JFK's assassination, what they did was absolutely illegal.
Right. And on the Israel deal, it seems to me this whole thing about you can't say anything about Israel. Why can't I? Can I say? I mean, you're also going to tell me pick out some other country I can't say anything about, Brazil. And all of a sudden you can't say anything about Brazil, or they'll pick out Madagascar. You can't say anything about Madagascar. We have freedom of speech. We can talk about anything. And this should and should be tried in the Supreme Court because it's First Amendment.
You're right. It is a First Amendment issue, but we're seeing efforts by various groups to whittle away at the First Amendment, and first and foremost among those, of course, is Israel. Israel wants to have it declared a crime to criticize the government of Israel. And no government is above criticism. No government is above review by the people. That's not the way it's supposed to work.
Okay, Mike, thanks a lot. I'll let you go then and go back to your other callers.
All right, thanks an awful lot here. The phone lines are open, and I've changed the links. So after you refresh your browser, clicking that top link up in announcements will bring you to the page where you can then click on the live feed for the video. So we're going to get that fixed. I'm going to look for a new system because this is it's just ridiculous. Let's see. There we are. All right. No, that didn't work either. Boy, I hate computers. Now, as you know, police have recommended that Benjamin Netanyahu be indicted for bribery and corruption. And apparently Netanyahu accepted very expensive gifts from Hollywood mogul Arnon Milchan and Australian billionaire James Packer. Now, Arnon Milchan apparently wanted some 10-year visas. I don't know why he would need those. But the other story is that Netanyahu made an arrangement with an Israeli newspaper for favorable coverage. Okay, and okay, I'll have to deal with that later. A lot of stuff going on here. So Netanyahu is now out there declaring he will remain in office. He vows to remain in office and no matter what. And he's acting like somebody who knows the fix is already in, where the police can recommend indictment, but if the prosecutor says, nah, then he's off the hook, unfortunately. China has rolled out their version of a stealth fighter, the J-20. The Navy calls it a serious threat to the United States, probably because, unlike the F-22 and the F-35, the J-20 actually works. And apparently it is designed to carry long-range weapons. So now we're going to talk a little bit about the economy. It's an article that came on out of Zero Hedge, basically saying there's this asset manager saying volatility isn't the problem. In fact, a lot of Wall Street traders like volatility. The more noisy and dynamic the market is, the more money they can make riding that straddle. But this asset manager's out there saying the real financial time bomb is public pensions. And he's absolutely right. And I would add the private pensions in there as well. Because all the way back in 2008, when Wall Street was putting together their mortgage-backed security fraud, the ratings agencies all rated them AAA, except for, I think it was Egan-Jones, said, no, there's something wrong here. And the SEC came down on them. But the other rating agencies all said, oh, yes, they're AAA. Now, pension funds, because their clientele are long in life, and they don't have the luxury of starting over and rebuilding their life in the event of an economic downturn, pension funds are only allowed to invest in AAA securities. So when Wall Street's rating agencies rated these mortgage-backed bundles AAA, pension funds bought them. And then the whole fraud exploded, and the pensions were defunded, both public and private. And that is the reason these pensions are in such trouble today. Now, of course, the corporate media is going to say that, oh, it's those people on pensions, they're expecting too much, they're living too long, we got to make them work later in life, because they don't have the gonadal tissue to point the finger of blame where it richly deserves to go, which is the financial establishment. Mostly because all of these TV networks and newspapers and radio stations, they all have loans. They all had to get financing to set things up. And I'm sure that when this story broke, they got phone calls from the bankers saying, don't mention that this has anything to do with the pensions. Blame it on old people. Now, there's a gentleman named John Williams, not the composer. This is the economist, founder of Shadow Stats. And he's basically saying that the U.S. deficit is beyond control. They're never going to get it under control. And the Fed triggered the stock sell-off, and the dollar may be heading for a collapse. And he's pointing on out that the real U.S. government debt is well over $100 trillion when you add in the unfunded liabilities. See, the U.S. government likes to cook the books, and we've all seen how they're cooking the books with the unemployment numbers. We only have 4% unemployment. No, we have 95, 97 million Americans willing and able to work who cannot find a job. That's what we have. But the U.S. government basically ignores people who have been out of work for a long time. That 4% are just the people who lost their job this week. And we know they're doing the same thing with the stock market. They're doing the same thing with calculating the rate of inflation. And they're doing the same thing to hide the true scale of the debt, because this nation is in serious financial trouble. And there doesn't seem to be any solution out there other than to start World War III and hope it all sorts itself out. Because that's what worked back in 1907 and 1929. Now, a Republican Senator, Ron Johnson from Wisconsin, has basically gone to Donald Trump and said, it makes no sense to try and bring back high labor manufacturing jobs to this country. And basically, along with Lamar Alexander, Mike Lee, Pat Toomey, and Roy Blount, they're trying to sell Trump on this idea to just give up this national economic revival and just accept the multinational corporate globalism. They're really trying to basically say that. You know, we're going to have products made cheaply overseas and bring them over to this country and sell them. Really? To who? Nobody here's got any more money. This economy cannot function if ordinary Americans cannot trade their skills and their labor for decent wages and salaries. We have people who are losing their homes, losing their cars. That's why Claire and I don't want to finance our new car purchase. We don't want to do that because everything is so uncertain. But I'll tell you, here's an article that really, I think, paints a stark picture of what's going on. This is from Russia Today, and it's talking about America's decline. And we are an empire in decline, no question about that. And it comments on how in the richest country in the world, there are open pools of raw sewage all over the country. And apparently they got this information from a 2-week investigation into extreme poverty run by the UN, who visited California, Alabama, Georgia, Puerto Rico, West Virginia, and Washington, D.C. There's poverty in Washington, D.C. There's poverty everywhere because all the wealth is focused at the very, very top of the pyramid, the money junkies. And they don't want to let any of it go. They want it all for themselves. It's ours, it's ours, it's ours. Go out and starve to death and reduce the surplus population. Ebenezer Scrooge has got nothing on these people. They're addicts. They're addicts. We need to recognize that extreme greed is a mental illness. Now, Bill Murray, you probably remember him from the original Saturday Night Live and the Ghostbusters movies, and he's been coming on out and saying a lot of things, and it's becoming obvious that he's a libertarian, and he's out there praising the GOP tax cuts, saying it is a fantastic thing. And he's saying it's a good thing, it's a high tide raising all boats. Unfortunately, that's not necessarily true. This high tide is only raising the yachts. And those of us who are in canoes or fishing boats, we're still being left down at the bottom. And that is probably the biggest single problem with the GOP tax plan. All the benefit went to the money junkies. And ordinary working class Americans, they gave us a few crumbs to make it look like we got something out of this. And meanwhile, of course, the national debt is going up, the deficit is going up, and it is out of control. The only way they could actually stop this is to basically end all the wars and stop spending all that money, which is borrowed money, by the way, on the war machine. We're going to take a break for commercials. Join us on the air, 800-313-9443, and we'll be right back. Aloha America, welcome back to the show here, and the corporate media is still totally focused on this Parkland high school shooting. They're saying many fatalities. I can't get an accurate number on that yet, but I got to tell you, my gut is telling me Sandy Hook. Also, I had somebody who wrote on in and reminded me it was actually Kennedy's Secret Service detail that illegally seized his body at Parkland Hospital and took it back to Washington, D.C. Something else about the Secret Service. The night before the assassination, they were all out drinking at an after-hour bar, and they were drinking Everclear, which is this really potent industrial alcohol. And they're not supposed to drink on duty, and not one of them was ever challenged on that. They weren't punished. They weren't demoted. Secret Service are not always that trustworthy. Just ask Indira Gandhi. She was assassinated by her protective detail. All right, getting on back to the economic news here. The CEO of Ripple is warning that the cryptocurrency values could drop to zero in a price plunge. And again, I've always had a sense of tulips about cryptocurrencies. And I dabbled in them a little bit, but unfortunately I've had to stop because Hawaii passed a law banning cryptocurrencies or cryptocurrency wallets. So that's all gone now. We were talking before about how the U.S. government is literally cooking the books to hide things from us, like the old Soviet Union used to do. And so there's an article that came out of Investment Watch blog, How to Hide Massive Levels of Unemployment in the U.S. And it's basically talking about the fact that in past decades, the normal expectation for workers was a full-time job, long-term, with a good company. that you would stay there, work your way up, learn the systems, and that would be the norm. Today, it's all temporary jobs, especially it really took off to get away from the Obamacare mandates. You know, these are part-time workers. They're exempt. I don't have to buy health insurance for them. But I went on out and I hunted down a whole bunch of these headlines about what's really going on with employment. Amazon laying off corporate employees in rare cutback. This was the Seattle Times. Microsoft starts layoff of thousands of employees. Seattle Times. CNN, despite Trump bump, prepares for dozens of layoffs. That was in Vanity Fair quite recently. And apparently, right now, in terms of the ratings, CNN can't even get 1 million viewers for any of their shows. They're in serious, serious trouble. And again, they did it to themselves because they weren't reporting the news. They were just spouting propaganda at you, and they destroyed their own credibility. Let's see. Boeing factory where Trump delivered job speech to lay off 200 workers. Amazon laying off 58 workers in North Charleston self-publishing business, so forth and so on. Okay, there's the music. We're going to take a break for station identification, and we'll be back with hour number 2. Join us on the air, 800-313-9443. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show, hour number 2, and we're going to go right to the phones here to Nancy in California. Aloha, Nancy. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Michael. You can get online and there's video footage of that assassination. Mm-hmm. They had little footsteps at the back of his car
that
the Secret Service was supposed to stand on. And there was a car behind his car with, I assume, Secret Service that were waving the guy off. And so you saw that footage?
Yeah, that actually took place at the Dallas airport, where there was a Secret Service agent who was going to mount on that bumper step. There's also a small handle there, and he was waved off by the supervisor of the protective detail. And he throws his arms up and says, "What the heck is going on?" And I've seen that footage.
Exactly. And so I think that they were, obviously they were setting it up for him to be vulnerable from the get-go.
Absolutely.
I believe the Secret Service was behind it.
They should have put that bubble top on. There's a plexiglass bubble top that went on that limousine that would have deflected the shots, and that was taken off and just left off.
So they hated Joseph Kennedy. They called him an anti-Semite.
Yes.
And, they killed all 3 sons, actually. His one son that was in the war was on a non-combat mission, and he was killed.
Well, people get killed in non-combat missions here, but there were a lot of people who hated the Kennedys. They were seen as new money coming out of Prohibition. But in terms of John F. Kennedy, the group that was working against him consisted, first of all, of Israel, because Kennedy did not want them to get nuclear weapons. The Federal Reserve, because of Kennedy's Executive Order 11110, the Texas oil billionaires, because of the oil depletion allowance issue, organized crime. The mafia was against him. They felt he'd double-cross them because they'd been helping him win the election against Richard Nixon, and then John F. Kennedy appointed his brother as Attorney General and sent them after organized crime. Then you had the CIA, which hated Kennedy for the Bay of Pigs fiasco. And they all wanted him.
Who killed?
What?
Right. But who killed Lee Harvey Oswald? The person who killed Lee Harvey Oswald was Jack Rubenstein.
Yes. And he was a bag man for the mafia. And he was supposedly allowed into the basement of the Dallas Police Department by a guy named Ray Vaughn, who was then promoted to Chief of Police of Midlothian, Texas. Are you still there?
Pretty slimy people.
Yes, they are.
I am still here. Despicable people. It was just evil. And those people who orchestrated that have remained in power, in my opinion.
Well, their heirs and their followers have remained in power.
Yeah,
most of the original plotters are dead now.
Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely. That's what I meant. That whole... Yes. Okay. Thanks.
All right, thanks an awful lot for the phone call. We're going to let you go here. And I do have a JFK page. And again, if you go to my website, there's that gray box of permanent articles right underneath the banner. And you can see JFK is in there, RFK, JFK Jr., Martin Luther King, Vince Foster, of course. They're all in there, the whole mess. Now, getting on back to the economic news. Russian financial institutions are now ready to disconnect from the SWIFT system. SWIFT stands for the Society for Worldwide Interbank Financial Telecommunication. And this is the global dollar-based interbank payments network. And it is because everybody uses this network that the U.S. government is able to enforce sanctions. They just throw a switch and all of a sudden the interbank transfers stop working. Well, Russia has been working on developing their own parallel system to be used with the BRICS nations. And apparently they're now ready to basically disconnect from SWIFT and go on their merry way without them. And I think probably a lot of other countries are going to follow suit because they're beginning to realize anytime they're tangling up their nation with any U.S.-based economic system, computer system, it makes them vulnerable because our government is weaponizing everything, including the economic system. Now, turning to Europe, interesting statement. Over in Italy, Berlusconi is pointing out that only 5% of Italy's 630,000 refugees qualify for refugee status. Only 5%. And that's obviously, there's something wrong with the system. These are not really refugees. There are specific definitions as to what constitutes a refugee. These people don't meet it. 95% of these 630,000 refugees don't qualify as refugees. And Berlusconi says they represent a social time bomb that is ready to explode. And he's certainly right about that. We've been seeing all the trouble that these migrants are causing all over Europe. Now, again, back in Italy, there's a candidate for prime minister, Matteo Salvini, who's saying exactly the same thing. Out-of-control immigration is causing social conflict. It's a mess out there. All right, we're going to do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining the network. Corporate media is still on this Parkland shooting. They're not reporting on anything else. I got to tell you, this really feels like another shady hook, if you will. Now, we've been talking about George Soros and how he aroused the ire of quite a few people in Great Britain by donating money to an organization whose stated objective is to undo the Brexit, to just wreck it, to keep Britain attached to the European Union. And Soros, in response to the criticism, threw more money at the organization. Death to Brexit. And now he's been joined by Richard Branson. And Branson is now calling on members of Parliament to vote against the withdrawal bill at the end of Brexit negotiations, despite polls showing the majority of British people still want to leave. But to heck with democracy, to heck with what the people want. Actually, there's a story that came out of the Express that apparently the anger level in the general population is really starting to climb over this issue. The British voters made their will known, and they're very, very angry at all these people who have the arrogance to presume to undo what the people voted for. Okay. Now, apparently a second U.S. judge, U.S. District Judge Nicholas Garaufis in Brooklyn, has blocked the Trump administration from ending the DACA program, the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals program. It will not end in March as planned. And apparently this was the result of immigrants who sued the Republican administration. That's odd. I didn't think they had standing. They're not citizens. Now, the decision is similar to an earlier ruling by a federal judge in San Francisco that DACA must remain in place while litigation over Trump's decision unfolds. And the legal battle over DACA could complicate a debate currently underway in Congress on whether to change the nation's immigration laws. We don't need more laws. We already have laws. It's called Title VIII. They're not being enforced. That's the problem. So it's a waste of time for Congress to get together and vote through more laws if they're not going to enforce them. Keep hearing from the pro-immigration people. Immigration creates wealth. Really? Why is California broke? Immigration does not create wealth. There aren't enough jobs for the legal American citizens, let alone the illegal immigrants. And all of these immigrants all over the country, they are putting a strain on our infrastructure, on our water, on the social services. This is an unmitigated disaster. But I guess our politicians are just happy as all get out to get those campaign donations from people like George Soros. Okay, over again, California. C.K. McClatchy High School. Apparently, students, parents, and staff are upset over a science fair project by a student in the Elite Magnet program. And basically, this student went on out and did a science project on IQ and race. And it came on back, to nobody's surprise, saying that there are certain races that are not as intelligent as others. And of course, that's not politically correct. We're all created equal, no matter how unequal we may be. And so basically, due to pressure, the school basically yanked this study, saying it's going to hurt and upset the people in those races with the lower IQs. Well, that's not going to raise their IQs. That's the problem right there. And this is nothing new. There have been a lot of studies that show there are certain races that have more brains. And when I was a member of Mensa, we observed this. There were certain races that qualified for Mensa, and there was an absence of others. That's reality. And one of the problems I have with political correctness is its complete abandonment of reality in favor of this liberal fantasy world, where just by screaming and whining you can get everything that you want. All right, we're going to take a phone call now. Peter in Los Angeles, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Mike, before we get into anything, I want to ask you, I'm making a checkout. I just wrote one to Republic Broadcasting.
Good.
Home-baked entertainment, 98-871. This is for you, too, right?
Please, Peter, please don't put my address out on the air. I
okay, it's on your website. So
it's on the website. But
that's why I make the checkout, right?
Yeah.
So I make the checkout, too. Okay, you got it. Okay. Yeah, Michael, it's political correctness, and I'm in a mixed family. My daughter is mixed.
Yes.
The people that I love most in my life are black. But all the data, and it goes back to the First World War when they first started doing standardized, basically IQ tests.
Yes.
There's a 10-point deviation, and it doesn't work out so great for white people because Asians work out to be about 4 or 5 points higher than we do.
Yes.
And give them their due. I mean, they're but the just as it's absolutely completely evident that as a rule, I think black people are superior athletes. As a rule, they are. The average black person is, I'd say, like a 7 on the white scale. And the average white person physically is like a 4 on the black scale, and so that's a given in my and I used to say to my friend who's this liberal professor and my neighbor at Northridge,
yes.
Cal State Northridge in women's studies, but she's a dog lover. And I would tell her, do you see a difference in behavior between a pit bull and your Chihuahua? Mm-hmm. And they go, yeah. And I go through the whole dog breed thing where there's definitely, a chow against a golden retriever. There's definitely, and so there's different behavioral traits too.
Yes.
So it is what it is. People are equivalent. They're not equal. They're equivalent. And that doesn't mean to say there aren't brilliant black people. My daughter is much smarter than me. She is 15 and she gets $40,000 a year scholarship to a private school that costs $43,000. And because she's never had a B. She's much smarter than I am. My wife is smarter than I am. But there's, not to say there aren't brilliant black people, but as a rule, statistically, it's as undeniable as looking at the NBA or NFL and saying, hey, black people are better athletes. You look at, there's 100 years of data on this, and they totally ignore it.
Yeah, it's politically incorrect. I mean, the idea is they're starting out with this claim that all men are created equal, which is good politics, but it's not real. And because it's very difficult to prove that you're providing equality of opportunity, it's much more expedient to mandate equality of outcome and simply say you are now all equal in pay. We're hiring on a quota-based system. We have so many people from each category working as doctors and stuff. But that's not real world. And again, if I have to go into the hospital and be operated on, I want the most intelligent, smartest person holding that scalpel. I don't want to be operated on by somebody who got there on a quota system.
Yeah, exactly. And Mike, the up until even parts of Africa today, they're hunter-gatherers. But 100 years ago, 150 years ago, they were almost all hunter-gatherers in Africa.
Yes.
Herdsmen and hunter-gatherers. And, the guy, the Darwinian selection thing was the big, strong guy who could hunt better and go out and he got the girl.
Yes.
For 1,000, 2,000 years, there's been a sophisticated economy in, the Middle East and Europe and all that, where it's the rich guy who got the girl.
Yes.
The rich guy is the one who got the girl. It's a different natural selection process up until the last 150 years. So
you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. And again, yes, we guys, we want to get the girls. Certainly Bill Clinton demonstrated that to us. But again, this idea of simply declaring everybody is equal, it's politics. It's not science. We're all different, unique individuals. And we're all born with different skills, different talents. We may be very brilliant in one area and maybe not so sharp in another area. And again, this flies against liberal dogma that is still clinging to Margaret Mead's Coming of Age in Samoa that says we're all born with blank minds.
Well, I think that I take issue with the Margaret Mead thing, and I would tell you that you can look at different breeds of animals and dogs.
Yes.
For instance, everybody has dogs and can kind of relate to this, and they're bred for different things. A German Shepherd is much different than a Golden Retriever.
Yes.
And they're just different, and they behave differently, and they're wired just a little bit differently. So,
yeah, and they vary in intelligence greatly. I mean, the Jack Russell Terrier is considered the most intelligent dog. Then I've had a couple of dogs that were absolute morons.
And Mike, even though it's in my opinion, it's as undeniable that black people are physically gifted. But every once in a while, you get Larry Bird or Jerry West. But it's every once in a while, and every once in a while, you get some brilliant guy, Michael Eric Tyson or whatever his name is, or some and
George Washington Carver.
They're brilliant black people.
George Washington Carver.
They're brilliant black people. Yeah. But that's my comment, anyways.
All right. Well, thank you for the comment. And is there anything else you wanted to share with us?
Nah, thank you. But I can send this off to your thing right here. Okay.
All right. Thanks an awful lot. I appreciate the help. Republic Broadcasting appreciates the help. And we're going to let you go here. Things are very, very tight. It's serious. It's serious. What can I tell you? Okay, over in the Netherlands, they have passed a law that makes every citizen a potential organ donor unless they specifically choose to opt out. And the upper house of the Dutch parliament approved this new donor law on Tuesday by a slim majority. And so every Dutch adult who is not registered as a donor will receive a letter asking if they want to be a donor after death. I actually think this is a good idea. Okay, and I think that could be the default position. Obviously, a lot of people with their religions don't want to be donors, but I think I agree with this. We're going to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're going to go back to the phones right now. Frank in North Carolina. Aloha, Frank. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Mike, thanks for taking my call. Hey, I just wanted to focus in on a key element of this shooting in Lakeland Park, Florida. Just heard something on the news. I've been following this for about an hour or so. My local 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock news broadcast team is Maureen O'Boyle, who I think used to be on Inside Edition or something, so people may be familiar with her. Mm-hmm. And her co-host there, Paul Cameron, who's been around in Charlotte since I was a boy. She just reported that there seems to have been an issue today, and the reason that there was so much confusion at the school during all of this, and I don't even know what she's talking about. I'm like, of course there's going to be confusion at a shooting. But she said the reason that there was so much confusion is because there was a drill. There was a drill going on, and I'm pretty sure she was talking about a shooting drill, an active shooter drill.
No, actually it was a fire drill. It was a fire drill. And so basically the students were evacuating the school, and that's when the shooter started picking them off. So, yeah.
Wow, okay. I'd heard about the fire alarm going off. I figured the shooter probably had set that off, but it was an actual drill.
Well, I saw it reported that it was a fire evacuation drill, but that also occurred to me that maybe the shooter actually pulled the alarm.
Right. Okay, never mind. Thank you.
All right, thanks an awful lot, Frank. And, I mean, obviously the networks are still going on about this. The politicians are all piling on and talking about the need to disarm the American people for safety. And I'm looking at this one reporter who is bringing us the latest update, and behind him is a street full of police cars, and they all still have their lights on. It's a big show. Got the flashing lights going. They've already got the suspect arrested. You know, they're in the process of getting the uninjured children back to their parents. But it looks more like a movie set than a real crime. All right, back to the phones here. Terry in California. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Mike, with the economy going down, do these people really think they can save our economy if they start a war? I mean, that wars are expensive. They take a lot of money. And if they think they're going to dilute the dollar to pay for it, I don't know if that's going to work.
Well, it's not so much as repairing the economy with a world war, but giving the government something to blame it on. You know, if the economy collapses now and they don't have a war, then the American people are going to blame Wall Street, the bankers, the Federal Reserve in Washington, D.C. If they can get a war cranked up before the economy collapses, then the government can say, it's not our fault, we didn't do anything wrong, it's those gosh darn Russians and those gosh darn Chinese. But the U.S. does have a history of getting into a world war to basically distract from and try and fix bad economies. Crash of 1907, World War I. Crash of 1929, World War II. Crash of 2008, and here we are. And yes, it is all borrowed money, but I'm sure what the U.S. is thinking is that they're going to drop that debt on whoever loses the war. Because in World War I, when Germany surrendered, Germany was required to pay the war debt of all the participating nations. So they all those other nations got off scot-free.
Well, if the dollar collapses halfway through a war, all of a sudden logistics stops and nothing moves, and we're defeated.
I think we're going to be defeated anyway. I don't think we can win this war. And right now, our government, especially our foreign policy machine, we're making enemies faster than our military can kill them off.
Right. And you mentioned the Soviet Union-style collapse. To the best of my knowledge, the ruble, nobody had any money. The troops were out there soliciting money from the motorists going by.
Yes.
If that happens here, maybe all Social Security checks will stop. Maybe all military retirement will stop. Maybe all disability from the VA is going to stop. If that happens, this whole country is going to go up in gunfire.
Yeah, it's going to be pretty bad. It's going to be really, really bad. And it's like I was saying on yesterday's show, we have to find a way to motivate our friends and neighbors, our fellow American citizens, to just understand how dangerously close we are to a real world war that is probably going to be fought with nuclear weapons. And we all have to mobilize the American people to stand up to the government and say, this foolishness has gone on long enough and it is time to stop it.
Well, last time I wrote my senator with those words, he came back and was totally on board with military-industrial complex, all these things. We had to get into Syria because he was gassing his own people. That's what he wrote back to me. So I don't know if there's much of a hope. Anyway, Mike, there's music, and we'll talk to you later. Bye.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to take another break for commercials. Join us on the air, 800-313-9443, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And before we go back to the telephone lines, a couple of quick stories coming on up. We now have the name of the Florida shooter, Nicholas Cruz, and I just put up a link to an article about his Instagram account, where he's got pictures of himself posed with guns and knives and all kinds of stuff like that, which in one way is very reassuring. Obviously, the NSA isn't able to spy on us all, or they would have realized this kid was dangerous. Or maybe they realized he was dangerous and he got recruited to be the patsy in another Sandy Hook here. Another story just surfaced here. The judge that just issued an order blocking President Trump's plan to phase out DACA has a history of letting his personal beliefs impair his ability as a jurist. And apparently at one time, the Second Circuit Court of Appeals literally removed this judge, Nicholas Garaufis, from a racial discrimination case against the New York Fire Department after Garaufis called the department, quote, a stubborn bastion of white male privilege. So this guy's a liberal. No question about it. All right, let's take some phone calls here, starting with Sovereign Man. Aloha, Sovereign. What's up, Sav? You're on the air. What's on your mind?
Can you hear me okay?
I hear you just fine.
Great. I wanted to touch on the subject of organ donation.
Yes.
And what really happens upon the organs being harvested from the donor.
Mm-hmm.
There's a dark side to organ donation, and that is they try to keep the body alive, and most times the individual is still alive when the organs are being harvested.
Well, that's a pretty extreme comment to be making. I mean, I thought organs could not be harvested until the brain had died, and yes, the body dies at different rates of speed.
Yeah, well, the definition of death varies upon the situation.
No, brain death is basically you're wired up to an EEG and there's zero activity.
No, I've listened to many programs that Deanna Spingola has had on the subject.
Yes.
And I beg to differ.
All right, well, we agree to differ.
They can give you They can give you, they can institute drugs that will shut down different parts of the body. The individual, majority of the time, is still alive.
Well, on the back of my organ donor card, I do have an admonition. Please make sure I'm really dead before you cut me up. Although at my age, I can't imagine anybody would want any of my organs. So, thank you for the phone call.
Help somebody else out.
Okay, thank you for the phone call. We're going to let you go and switch over to Chris in St. Petersburg. Aloha, Chris. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Michael, what Sovereign Man just said, I agree with. From my research, I've decided I don't want to be an organ donor, and it's something I've researched quite a bit. And there's some good websites like organfacts.net, truthaboutorgandonation.com, Dr. Paul Burns' site, Life Guardian Foundation, and he. This is what I have in my notes. So this is all my original. These are my original words here. Because all organs must be harvested fresh only from a living donor, one might, according to Dr. Paul Byrne at lifeguardianfoundation.org, one might want to consider writing and documenting a refusal of organ donation. Otherwise, one might be incorrectly presumed to be an organ donor, thus one's demise likely to be hastened. As banks charge fees for mere transactions, many doctors and nurse accomplices daily murder folks for the billable service of potentially saving or easing lives of body part recipients. Quote, it's the only reason I'm here now, end quote, the son of an organ donor, son of a man on an organ donor registry, awakens from a quote-unquote brain-dead state after a gun-toting dad engages in 3-hour armed standoff with police to block doctors from pulling the plug.
I remember reading that story. Well, unfortunately, the reality is the state of our medical care in this country is not good, and I recognize there's a risk that doctors are going to do something even without organ donation. Medical errors are the leading cause of death in this country, and you do take your life in your hand anytime you go to the clinic. But there are circumstances in which organ donation is perfectly acceptable. For example, most transplant hearts are taken from motorcycle accidents where the brain has just been completely destroyed. There's obviously no way this person is going to come back to life. But the heart continues to beat, keeping the heart supplied with blood if they can get to it in time, and that's where most donor hearts come from. In any case, I have made the decision. When I die, I'm going to donate my body to science because I figure medical students can always use a good laugh.
Yeah. Well, that's true about hearts. Apparently, a couple years ago, that was one exemption that I found. Is there's a device, and I haven't found the name of it. I've just seen a video on Facebook about it. Reanimation isn't just for zombies. Is the title. Scientists have discovered a way to bring a heart back to life for use in transplants from Hashem El Gaili. Harvard did a study 3 years ago saying that iatrogenocide or iatrogenic hospital medical errors are the third leading cause of death in this country. And that story I was mentioning was, had it not been for armed father George Pickering II, his son George Pickering III wouldn't have lived so quickly to make a full recovery from the alleged coma. And there are a lot of other studies I found like that. Just this one, the father was...
Okay, well, I understand your concerns. I understand your concerns, and I'm hearing that, and I'm also getting some emails on the issue, and I guess that's why this law in the Netherlands does give a person the choice to opt out of being an organ donor. But again, we know that one of the best ways to stop the black market in organ trafficking is to make sure that there is a surplus of legitimately donated organs for the hospitals to use. because unfortunately, as scared of doctors as you may be, the black market organ harvesters are much more dangerous.
Yeah, I've heard that. And one last anecdote was last year there was an 8-year-old who was taken off life support. His organs were donated. He was pumped with fentanyl, and that was in Los Angeles, in the LA Times, and also all different so-called credible news outlets. But yeah, there's several others. I'll just email you all my notes on all these different stories.
Hold on. You said they were going to inject him with fentanyl?
They did inject. They killed him with fentanyl. They took him off life support.
That would render the organs unusable, because those organs are going to be saturated with the fentanyl. When you transplant them into another patient, that fentanyl will go into the circulatory system. So I have to question that one. I mean, normally when you take somebody off of life support and they're going to be donating the organs, you simply take them off the life support and let nature take its course. The idea that they supposedly terminated him with fentanyl, I don't think the organs would be usable. Anyway, thank you for the phone call. We're going to let you go. And somebody wrote on in to say that there is, in fact, a cutoff age that they don't bother harvesting organs from people over the age of 60. So good. I can relax. All right. Getting on back to the news here. There's still... corporate media is nothing but this school shooting. It feels like Sandy Hook all over again. Okay. Article that came out of Tech Dirt talking about how corporate media, and for that matter, entertainment, is trying to get a change to the copyright laws in this country. Now, the current copyright laws have what are called fair use provisions and internet safe harbors. And fair use allows you to excerpt from an article for the purpose of commentary or education. And there have been certain safe harbors for the internet to protect webmasters such as myself from bad behavior by people who log on to the website and post complete articles, copyrighted material, which is that's a no-no around here. That'll get you banned. But corporate media, the entertainment, specifically the Motion Picture Association of America and the Recording Industry Association of America, are trying to use NAFTA, the NAFTA renegotiations that are coming up, to basically get rid of fair use and safe harbors. And they're putting out this idea that the internet is harming content creators. Well, as far as the corporate media is concerned, we are harming them. We're taking away their audience because they are lying and people coming here for the truth. As far as other content such as music and movies, blaming the internet has become the fashion in Hollywood. The reality is that ticket sales are down and album sales are down because people just don't have the money. They do not have the money. And in the case of Hollywood movie making, it's remakes and retakes and all politically correct propaganda that people just don't want to use. They don't want to see it. They don't want to watch it. With one exception, I feel like inserting this here. Last night on cable, on the pay-per-view, we paid for it, was a movie based on the life of Mark Felt, and it starred Liam Neeson, and I'm so glad he's moved away from all this Taken stuff where he tried to be an action hero, because he's a fine actor, and he really showed it in this film. And it's the story of Mark Felt, who was a 30-year career FBI agent who was the deep throat of Watergate fame. And so if you've got it on your cable box, that's worth seeing. But for the most part, it's junk out there. You know, how many variations of Marvel comic book heroes can you see? And so these vice presidents in charge of production they're making bad choices, and the studios are losing money. But they don't want to lose their jobs, so they're out there saying, well, it's the internet pirates. If we could get those internet pirates, we would be making billions and billions of dollars. No, you wouldn't. Most of what's coming out of Hollywood right now, most of what's coming out of the music industry right now is not worth the trouble to steal. All right, we're going to take a phone call. Mateus in Canada, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Michael, I definitely agree with your last point there.
Yes.
Do you mind if I change the topic? Well,
go ahead.
Okay, so a couple of things. I want to talk about Occam's razor. A violation of Occam's razor would be to build a robot that can follow humans around in traffic and pull them over and give them tickets. That's way, way too complicated. There is an ulterior motive, and what it is it's to get the public accustomed to being hunted by a robot. That's my opinion. The other thing is that I wanted to talk about the Magna Carta, and the last 1,000 years of history in Europe was basically just we the people fighting for a little bit of dignity and freedom from the tyrants and the bankers and the royalists.
Okay, well, let's start with the robot. Let's start with the robot here. Again, applying Occam's razor, the simple explanation is it's just another way to take money away from the American people, and they're going to put a police officer out of work in the process. And I question whether such a complex robot can really be made reliable. But that's what's going on there. The fact of the matter is they don't need to get us used to being hunted by robots. If you're being hunted, it doesn't matter what you think about it. And as somebody who in my youth was a hunter, I didn't worry about the food that I was stalking getting used to the idea that I was hunting them. In fact, their reaction was very much they weren't happy about it at all. So getting on back to
humans will stand up and say no if there's too much of a violation of our human rights all at once. And that's what David Icke calls the totalitarian tiptoe. And so right now they have a robot police officer in China that has a police badge on it, but it looks kind of cute, and he's got 4 wheels, and he's not holding a gun, so we're letting it pass. Mm-hmm. They slowly creep up on us. So now it's a self-driving car that's hunting us around in public. Next, it's going to actually be a bipedal robot getting out of that car fully armed. But if they do that now, we're going to say no. So that's what we're basically just slowly creeping towards a robot police force and a robot military that's incapable of saying no to an illegal order. And if I can just leave it at that and go to the Magna Carta in England and in Europe, there's a relationship here, in my opinion, is that what happened is that the reason that we have the American Constitution and the Bill of Rights, that comes from the Magna Carta. And the reason we have the Magna Carta is and the reason we have the Magna Carta is because enough of we the people in the last 1,000 years in Europe were willing to bleed and die for demanding a little bit of dignity and a little bit of freedom against the bankers and the royalists. And we finally started winning enough battles and chopping off a few heads in France and other places that finally the King George came down and said, okay, I'll make a deal with you. I'll sign a piece of paper that you're going to have a little bit of dignity, a little bit of human rights, and stop chopping off our heads, and we'll just go on with the game. But the thing is to remember is that we didn't defeat our enemy then. It was just like a minor compromise. They still hate us. They're either direct bloodlines or else just people in the same kind.
Okay, Mateus, we have to take a break for commercials. Do not hang up. I'm going to come back to you right after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're talking to Mateus up in Canada, and a couple of points I need to make here. The Magna Carta was not signed by King George. It was signed by King John, and it was mostly the barons who stood up to him and forced him to sign the document. They were supported in turn by their conscripted forces. It's not at all like they portray in Robin Hood with Russell Crowe. Basically, the barons had armies of people that were just forced to be their soldiers. They stood up to King John. That's why back then there was a House of Nobles, but it wasn't until much later that the House of Commons was created. And in any event, both the barons and King John broke the Magna Carta almost immediately.
Well, I stand corrected on those finer points. The general concept is that we had a pretty much total control over the population by the royals and the bankers and the elites. And then after the Magna Carta was signed, there was a bit of a break in the complete stranglehold in that, even just a 10% reduction in the strangulation. And that's what gave birth to the Constitution and the Bill of Rights and all of that. So what we have to thank is a bit of a defeat, for whatever reasons, against the royalists back then. And those royalists, either by direct lineage or by people of the same mentality, still exist today. The bankers still exist. They still want to have a more total control. They don't appreciate that we forced a compromise. They don't appreciate that at all. They are still our blood enemies. And that's why the people that are really running everything are doing these horrible things to us constantly, like experimenting on us and treating us like dumb animals and sending us off to fake wars and poisoning our food supply and our air and our water and everything. Like, these people just hate us, and they hate the internet. They hate the independence and the self-empowerment that the internet gave us. They're trying to figure out how to censor that or correct it or control it or use it against us. And what they've finally decided is that they need to have more control over the population, and the way to do that would be to have a robotic police and military. And that's where this is going. And we're so dumb to not be more alarmed about it just because they're doing it in slow steps. Come on, let's just think ahead 10 years. If we've already got a police car that can follow you around and pull you over by itself, and we already see these military bipedal robots that can do backflips.
Yes.
Put it together, everybody. In 10 years, we're going to have a bipedal police officer robot coming out, fully armed. He's going to have 100 rounds in his gun. He can shoot all 100 of them in 1 second. They're all going to hit their target with smart bullets. They could go into a crowd with facial recognition, take out the 100 top leaders of a revolt in 1 second. We are facing a species-level extinction event by a complete robotic takeover of our civilization.
Hang on. Pull the hysteria back, because there are a couple of issues here. Well, I'll tell you what. Stay on the line. I'm going to come right back to you after station identification. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. We're talking with Mateus in Canada. And Mateus, just to sort of finish things up here. Okay, good. First of all, I don't think that artificial intelligence in 10 years is going to be able to replace a human police officer. Second, the money junkies don't hate us. They need us. They need us to make them more money. They need us paying taxes. They need us working in the farms and factories, breeding new workers and new laborers, because the rich people can't become rich without us. They need us as much as King John needed his subjects as well.
Yeah, I appreciate you letting me say my point there, and we'll just leave it at that. Just accept that I think they do need us, but they are changing us over. They're trading us in for robots is the theory. And I'll just leave you with another original joke.
Hang on. Let me respond. Okay, why are they trading us for robots? Robots don't buy things. Robots don't spend money. And that economic system of money flowing to the money junkies is what our society is built around.
Well, the money is used to have goods and services delivered to the palaces. And if you can have robots directly farming and manufacturing and transporting and delivering and cooking and baking and all that, you don't actually need the humans that can rise up and have a revolution, like we're all talking about.
We already have that. I remember I was taking George Bush to task for talking about how wonderful it is that illegal immigrants will pick our crops. Humans don't pick our crops anymore. Machines do. More and more factories are totally automated as well. And yes, I know that there are some depopulation people who talk about the useless eaters and so forth, but they don't need to build all these very expensive robots. All they need is one carefully crafted germ. Anyway, Mateus, thank you very much.
Okay, guaranteed. Let me just do the joke.
Okay.
The living joke. Okay, original joke, world premiere. What is the most feared event for a cross-eyed Olympian?
I have no idea.
The parallel bars. Talk to you later.
Okay. Moving on here, phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Getting on back to the news. Apparently, there is still a debate going on over just how much influence Russia really did have back in 2016. And supposedly Russia spent $100,000 on online ads during the election. Most of it on pro-Hillary ads. Not Trump ads, pro-Hillary ads. Facebook has admitted the Russian ads comprised only 4/1000ths of the newsfeed during the election. But liberals want you to believe this flipped the election. That's an obvious lie. Too few people saw the ads, and the ads were pro-Hillary. How does that flip the election? The one good thing that came out of the election, of course, was the beginning of this trend where the American people got disgusted with the corporate media and started coming to the independent media to find out what is really going on. All right, let's take another phone call here. Dennis, Indiana, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Mike. I'm a paraplegic and I don't have a TV, but I was talking to my mom. Have you heard of the breaking news that just my mom told me she saw on the news where one of the top Chicago policemen, I asked her, wasn't the superintendent. He was pretty high up there, a white guy, and just got shot and killed by a black guy that was had heroin and marijuana and tons of money on him, but yet he had a bulletproof vest on him. So there was something going on there. I was wondering if you heard that or seen if you got that on your news yet.
I hadn't put it on the page. I hadn't even heard about it, but I just brought it up here on my browser. Commander Paul Bauer of the 18th District was chasing a suspect when he was shot multiple times. And apparently he'd spotted a guy matching the radio description of an armed suspect, and he engaged in armed physical confrontation. So, yeah, and it's a shame that happened.
Yeah. Okay, I just wondering because I don't have a TV with me. I just have my radio. I'm paraplegic, so I get to listen to the radio.
Yeah, I like a good radio
you guys
as well.
All day.
Anyway,
yeah. Okay.
So there's the story. I will put it up on the next commercial break here. And thanks an awful lot for the phone call. We're going to let you go. I'm looking at the TV feed from this Florida shooting. For the last 15 minutes, all they've been covering is the fact that they're transporting the suspect from the hospital to wherever he's going to be arrested and arraigned, including the aerial helicopter shot, shades of O.J. Simpson. This is being fanned up. This isn't news reporting. This is a show. It's a pageant. This feels like another Sandy Hook. All right, we're going to do a shout-out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network here. We're talking about computers here right now. And there was an interesting little article that came on out from Zero Hedge about how your Facebook data is just creepy as all heck. And Facebook now allows you to download your profile, statuses, messages, friends, pokes, photos, videos, comments, and events in a gigantic zip file. And here is the part that makes it creepy. There's no expiration date on any of it. Everything you have ever done on Facebook since the day you signed up is being saved by Facebook. Now, I'm sure part of what they're doing with it is selling it to marketing people. But it is a little upsetting, I think, to those of us who value our privacy. And it's one of the reasons why I don't use Facebook much anymore. Now, if you're in Germany, you don't have to worry about that, because apparently a German court has ruled that Facebook's use of user personal data is illegal because Facebook did not sufficiently secure consent from users. And the Federation of German Consumer Organizations, that Facebook's terms of service and its default user settings breached consumer law. So there's a pushback there for our privacy. Okay, we were talking about food stamps, arguing back and forth about whether Trump's plan to replace food stamps with food boxes might be a good idea or not. And somebody sent me in this story where basically soft drinks are the #1 purchase by food stamp recipients. And apparently one grocery chain reported $357 million of soft drink sales by food stamp recipients. So it may not be abusive, but it's not necessarily healthy, is it? Scientists are warning now, prepare for a mini ice age as the sun cools. This is coming out of shtfplan.com. Gee, I wish they would make up their minds. Back in the 70s, coming ice age. 90s, it's getting warmer. Now we're 2018. We're back to screaming about an ice age. They don't really know what they're talking about. Anyway, basically, the latest word is that they understand. We're going into a new Maunder minimum. And that's going to bring a new mini ice age. And they're using the word mini because it's obviously not as severe as the Great Ice Ages, but it's still going to be a problem for the northern latitudes. Of course, the people of London might bring back the ice fairs. Back during the last mini ice age, during winter, the Thames would freeze over. It would freeze solid. And they would go on out and set up booths and have food and drink and festivals and puppets, and that was the winter fair. So we may be back to that as well. Now, there is a downside, unfortunately, and that is that we're already seeing cooling around the world. We've been seeing cooling for a couple of years, actually more than a couple, going back almost 10 years. And even though people like Al Gore deny it, farmers are noticing. Their growing seasons are shorter and shorter. Apparently over in Germany, farmers have experienced 42% less crop in fruit in 2017 compared to 2016. And according to the Federal Statistical Office, all crops are affected by drastic losses due to the extreme cold. Apparently, they had strong night frosts from the end of April. Everything from pears to cherries has been affected. So Al Gore and all of his global warming people, they were lying. They were wrong, absolutely. And corporate media went along with them. NASA went along with them. NOAA went along with them. Hadley Climate Research Unit, Penn State, New Zealand Meteorological Organization, Australian, all these science TV shows on the supposedly science channels, they were all wrong. They didn't question the science. They didn't do their own evaluation. Or maybe they did. There was a lot of money tied in with human-caused global warming. We're going to get carbon taxes. We're going to get rich selling carbon credits. All we got to do is scream booga booga at those dumb people watching our TV channels. And they'll give us their money, we'll just parcel it on out. So we just scream that the sky is falling, Chicken Little, and only you can save it. By the way, over in Montana, they just got a heavy snowstorm there, the most snow in 138 years. They got about 70 inches of snow. Another storm is coming on in. That's 4 feet above normal. Yes, global warming was a fantasy. That's why they tried to rebrand it as climate change. And when that didn't scare us enough, they called it climate disruption. But again, climate is always changing. It always has. It always will. There's never been a period of time in the history of planet Earth when climate wasn't changing. That's the reality. Now, over the years, I've gotten into the issue of some abusive situations by religious institutions. A while back, we had that priest who'd been defrocked for exposing the resident schools up in Canada. And we talked more recently about the unwed mothers' homes in places like Tuam, Ireland. We talked about this wonderful Judi Dench movie called Philomena. And now there's another story. This one is coming out of the Daily Mail. Apparently down in Spain, the Catholic Church was involved in baby trafficking for half a century. And apparently 300,000 babies were literally stolen from their parents and sold for adoption. BBC's actually made a documentary about it. And the children were trafficked by this network of doctors, nurses, priests, and nuns in a widespread practice that began under General Franco and didn't stop until the early 1990s. Now, hundreds of families who had babies taken from Spanish hospitals are now battling for an official government investigation. Mothers are saying they were told their children had died after birth. They were lied to. And this, coming from somebody who, from an institution that claims to represent the moral authority on earth of a supreme being. Now, Claire's actually written a song about all this stuff, and I'm getting ready to do a video about it as well. But if you get a chance to see Philomena, it's worth looking at. And it's based on a true story. It's based on the story of one of the mothers who had been in the Tuam home trying to find her son. How can you do that to a mother? How can you do that to kids? Apparently, the attitude of the nuns and priests in all of these institutions was, these women are sinners. They don't deserve any care or concern. They're sinners. They have sinned. I think they maybe ought to lighten up. That's a terrible, terrible thing. Okay. Let's get some callers in here, 800-313-9443, and get some discussions going. As you know, we had the supermoon, blue moon, lunar eclipse 2 weeks ago. And generally when you get a lunar eclipse, there's an associated solar eclipse. And as a matter of fact, that one is due to happen tomorrow. Unfortunately, this one is only going to be visible from Australia, Antarctica, and the southern tip of South America. Now, there's going to be another solar eclipse on August 11th, and that one comes over the North Pole, Northern Europe. So here in America, we're not going to see it. Now, apparently on the sun, despite the fact that it is cooling down and seems to be going into a quiet mode, there has been an event, and this is a coronal mass ejection. Apparently, it is a big one. It left the sun on the 12th, 2 days ago. It's expected to impact Earth tomorrow, producing a geomagnetic storm. So for you people who are in the really polar latitudes, you might see some spectacular auroras. And meanwhile, there might be some difficulty with satellite and shortwave communication as well. But the auroras are beautiful. All right, let's get on back here. More information is coming out. The shooter in Florida, 19 years old, Nicholas De Jesus Cruz. And apparently people are looking at his Instagram accounts and other social media. And like I said, obviously the NSA isn't really able to spy on us all, or they would have looked at this Instagram account and realized this guy was dangerous, that he needed to be looked into. Or maybe they're just spying on political opponents. That's certainly what the FBI's been doing. It's Watergate all over again. Now, apparently banks are becoming very concerned about Bitcoin, and they're trying to find a way to compete. And apparently several banks in Australia have rolled out a new payment system they're calling NPP, which stands for New Payments Platform. And apparently it's an instantaneous transfer between banks or merchants. And up until recently, apparently was very slow to accomplish that. Somebody pointed out that the Bitcoin miners are actually impacting some of these research projects like SETI at Home. Now, SETI at Home, as the name implies, it's aiding in the search for extraterrestrial life. And it relies on people signing up, and you get a screensaver, and your machine is harnessed, crowdsourced, if you will, to process data from radio telescopes looking for a signal that shows indications of being artificial. But apparently more and more people are starting to turn their computers' graphic processing units over to Bitcoin mining, and they're starting to unsubscribe from SETI at Home. And the SETI scientists are understandably a little upset about that. And now we're hearing this article about how Iceland, there are so many people mining Bitcoins up there, they're starting to deal with electricity shortages. We're going to take a break for commercials. Join us on the air, 800-313-9443, and we'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And there's an interesting story. This is coming out from PJ Media, and it's basically talking about a billboard campaign in Cleveland that wants to reduce the stigma around abortion. And it's a very simple sign. It says abortion is good medicine, and then down below is a website and a logo. Here's the thing. The billboards are all being put in the black neighborhoods. Now, remember we were talking the other day about yet another case where these free vaccinations being given to people in Africa were found to have sterilizing chemicals. And when Margaret Sanger established Planned Parenthood, it too was aimed at the black community. Something to think about. All right, let's take a phone call. Sherry in Texas. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, you'll have to help me here, Mike. SETI is a government smokescreen. SETI, they actually take you out to hotspots and let you see them. They vector them up. They let you see the crafts themselves. Usually the hotspots.
I'm talking about the privatized. There's a private operation, Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence. As a matter of fact, Steven Spielberg was one of their major underwriters following the success of E.T. and that movie. And they've got radio telescopes, and they're listening for sounds of civilization out there.
But they didn't. Yeah, but Mike, they're never going to find it.
Why not?
Because it's more than one dimension. They're interdimensional. You're not going to hear it in this dimension. You've got to go to the next one. SETI lets you see them.
Sherry,
I'm just telling you the difference between SETI and SETI.
Well, we're talking about SETI. We're talking about SETI. We're talking about real-world science here and how it's being accomplished. And unfortunately, the rush to mine bitcoins is actually taking away computer resources from the SETI project. Now,
good.
Thank you. What do you mean, good? All right, we're going to let you go, Sherry. And there we are. I find it strange that she's out there talking about some place where supposedly you can see a flying saucer, and then turns around and says, we're never going to find extraterrestrial life. Obviously, the two statements don't really go together very well. I am, it's impossible to conceive that ours is the only planet with life on it. And of course, I have the advantage. We discovered indigenous life on Mars during the Viking missions. And I'm sure there's intelligent civilizations out there. I can't think of a reason why they would bother visiting us. That would be like us stopping and visiting every anthill we drive past on the freeway. But I'm pretty sure they're out there. My concern is maybe we're looking in the wrong direction. And it might be possible to build a special ultra-low frequency radio that listens for the noise made by alternating current electrical systems, because every advanced civilization out there, they're going to go through the same evolution that we did. They're going to discover electricity. They're going to discover that alternating current is much more efficient than direct current, and they're going to establish a standard. And AC power is most efficient in a very narrow range of frequencies. So you're talking about a planet covered with high tension lines and power transformers radiating terawatts of power in the primary format of their AC, as well as all the harmonics, which are going to have greater radiative power. So that would be, I think, worth looking at. When I win the Irish sweepstakes, I'll probably build a radio transmitter and do that very thing for myself. Okay, let's go back to the phone list here. Ed in Florida, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Ooh, wow.
Hello, Mike. I'm about 100 miles from the shooting, and I'm kind of curious whether or not this could be one of Obama's dreamers. After all, his name is Nicolas de Jesus Cruz, I believe.
De Jesus. That would be an interesting question to find on out.
So they'll probably never let us know. I mean, things in Florida, it's one of the most constitutional states where you could own and purchase weapons, but that may not be the case after today. There's been legislation in every state since Sandy Hook where they want to take guns away from legal-abiding Americans. And I don't know. I don't want to sound like a conspiracy theorist, but ever since Columbine, there hasn't been a year that hasn't gone by where there hasn't been a mass shooting in a school. Automatically, the politicians clamor for more gun control. Now, growing up in the 70s and 80s, when it was easier to obtain guns illegally, you didn't have shootings in schools.
Yeah.
So
I went through the same thing.
So what's changed?
Okay. Now, Ed, we're going to have to take a short break for commercials. Do not hang up, because I want to come back to you and talk to you about this issue, because you're absolutely right. When everybody was armed, you never had mass shootings. And again, all these gun grabbers are out there. My first response is, what a shame they didn't have a teacher that had a gun there. And they're just now reporting 17 people were killed in this. 17 people instead of just one, had they armed their teachers. All right, we're going to take a break for commercials. Ed will be right back after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And I'm unable to find any mention about where this shooter, this Nicolas de Jesus Cruz, came from. If he was a citizen, if he was a dreamer, if he was a DACA, they're not saying. And I would imagine probably the pro-immigration people prefer it that way. Remember, over in Germany, they've actually passed laws. When something like this happens, you're not allowed to mention if it's a refugee or not. So, Ed, I'm absolutely in agreement with you. When everybody was being taught gun safety, there were no mass shootings. Where I grew up in New Hampshire, 12th birthday, you get your first firearm, and you get to talk about gun safety. And the first time you mishandle that gun, you get a trip to the woodshed, keeps you eating dinner, standing up for at least a week. And there were no school shootings. We'd take our guns to school. We'd put them in the cloakroom, because on the way home from school, we'd have to varmint out the fields. And nobody got shot.
We had a shooting gun club. Shooting gun club when I went to high school.
The U.S. government used to donate military surplus weapons to these gun clubs in the schools.
Yeah, the old M1 grant, it happened. I mean, it was a different country back then. I mean, I hate to say we've allowed certain politicians with dual citizenships to make laws for us, And they want to disarm the American people as the people in Europe are disarmed. Then we're flooded by third world refugees who rape and pillage and eventually take over our cultures and countries. I mean, I'm just going by facts that I can just see happening in Europe. It's just a matter of time before something tragic happens in this country, Mike, something more than just a school shooting where, like in England, they will ban ownership of all private weapons. You are allowed when it has to remain in a gun club that you only shoot a couple times a week, but you can't take it home. It's just not gun. It's not gun control. I think it goes past that. It's actually confiscation is what they're looking for, because, like I said, in the 70s, 80s, early 90s, you didn't have this up until Columbine. After that, it's been every year. 17 so far this year, according to some congressman I was watching in C-SPAN.
Oh, yeah, they're already pounding on this as hard as they can. You know, got to be a gun ban, got to be a gun ban. No, give everybody a gun, teach them gun safety. The other problem that we're dealing with, of course, is the fact that starting in the 1990s, the single-income family went extinct. And the feminists got women out of the home, out of the household, and into the labor force. And then the tax structure was changed to lock them there. And so as a result, kids are being raised without any parental guidance regarding morality or the right way to behave. What they're learning is what they see on TV and movies. And TV and movies are all about bang, 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 bang. We're gonna shoot up everything and ask questions later. And then the hypocrisy of all these people in Hollywood who've made all this money making these movies about with guns, standing up and saying, "Oh well, you know, guns are a terrible thing." That really is hypocritical.
Now, you can watch video games. They're all bang, bang, shoot them up like Grand Theft Auto, the series, Saints Row. I know because my kids played, and no matter how hard I tried to stop them, they would always have a friend who had a friend who had a friend who had a copy of the game. And these games just lead kids to think, well, you know, if I can do it, you know, through a video game, why can't I do it in real life? These minds aren't fully developed, Michael.
I agree.
And I don't think games like that should be made for anyone under maybe 30, but the kids get their hands on them. And our society has turned from a society where you could walk the streets. Florida used to be an open carry state until '89.
Yes.
After that, you know, we still have concealed carry, but you've got to be 21 in order to have a pistol. And like you said, if a teacher in the classroom maybe had a pistol, if this truly happened, just like in Columbine or any other school shootings, you wouldn't have these mass shootings because people would know better. You wouldn't know whether or not your teacher had a 45 or a 38 hip, class to his hip, or even better yet, open carry. They always say an open carry society is a very nice, polite society.
I would be in favor of open carry because it's going to send a message. You know, you will be shot at if you come in here with guns blazing away. And here's what's really interesting or alarming. We already talked about the fact that this guy's Instagram page has all these pictures of him with these throwing knives and guns, and I don't know if they're airsoft or if it's the gun that he actually used. But apparently a teacher at the school said that Cruz had been identified as a potential threat to fellow students. Apparently he was routinely threatening other students, and he was basically kicked off the campus. So, again, there were warning signs, and people just weren't paying attention.
Michael, either that, they were hoping this kid would just go up. And I mean, I don't believe in conspiracies all the time, but yet when you look at the type of people who have committed these so-called mass murders, like the Joker killer from Aurora shooting back in 2011. I mean, whatever happened to him? He was a young guy working on his master's degree. Suddenly, he drops out of college. Where the hell do you get that kind of money, Michael? $12,000 to buy the type of ammunition. A lot of it you can't buy unless you're in the military.
Yeah,
I mean,
here's the thing. Here's the thing. Okay, a gun ban will never stop the bad people. It's only going to disarm the law-abiding citizen. Bad people can always get guns. You can build guns. I know. I did it as a hobby when I was a kid. Black powder firearms. And if you're the only one with a gun, even a black powder gun can be very effective. So you're not going to disarm the bad people. So gun control is really people control. In fact, I would say that anti-gun is pro-crime, because every time you ban guns from the population, crime goes right through the roof. And when you realize that we've got a criminal government in Washington, D.C., it does sort of make sense that they want to basically declare open season on law-abiding American people for other criminals to come in and harvest our wealth. Anyway, Ed, thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go. We've got a bunch of other people waiting on the phone line, and we're going to start with Francis in Idaho. Aloha, Francis. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yes, sir. You talked about Philomena. I did see that. That was quite excellent.
Yes.
Very well done.
Yes. I love everything Judi Dench does. She's just amazing.
And another thing, you were talking about organ donors. Did you see the Independent Never Let Me Go?
Did I see what?
Did you see the independent film Never Let Me Go?
No, I didn't.
Oh, you've got to watch that. Would you please make a note right now on paper to watch that?
Yeah, actually, go ahead and yes. Okay. I'm sorry. I'm communicating with our control room here. So yeah. Okay, it's really excellent. And Alice Springs comes to mind when I watch that movie, but I watch it over and over. It's got Keira Knightley in it. Okay.
If you think you don't want to watch it, just pull her up, her IBN or whatever it is, and make your judgment from there. But it's also got that other good Brit actress in there. Can't think of her name. Short little blonde, really making good headway.
Okay.
It's not a true story like your film was, but it's just a what if. And it's set in the late 50s, early 60s, and you were talking about all these babies that were adopted out in real time in Ireland or whatever you said earlier. I was doing things too. Anyway, please watch the movie, and I'll call you on it in a month or two, man.
I will try and hunt that down. Thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to switch over to Francis in North Carolina. Aloha, Francis. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, aloha to you both.
Aloha.
Obviously, the thing in Lakeland, Florida, is really starting to heat up, or whatever the case is. But from what I've seen of the initial article about that, there's a couple of things that don't add up, and I have to agree that it's like another Sandy Hokie. And I'm wondering if Helsvig, who happens to reside in Florida, is going to be kind of keying in or examining what's going on with that fiasco, if he's even allowed near that area. One, I'm trying to figure out why, whenever they have a bunch of students come out, whether it's a drill or fire drill or whatever, why do they have them having their hands up in the air or behind their head as though they are themselves criminals? I don't get that part.
I don't either. I think it's the police are trying to make sure that there isn't an additional shooter hiding among the students. And so, yeah, the kids are told to put their hands up, and they're being treated like criminals. And it's a traumatic thing to put them through.
Yeah, that's kind of putting it lightly. And on top of that, from one of the scenes that they had from like an aerial view, one of the officers or security guards or whatever the personnel is official-wise is standing there talking with someone, like as if they're having a casual conversation or chat, and they're basically holding or dangling or swinging around a what appears to be a security vest or a bulletproof vest or whatever from one of their hands beside their body. And I'm like, wait a minute, if they're in the process of a drill or an active shooter scenario, why are they just simply dangling a garment like that beside their body as though, just another day of training or some kind of whatever you want to call it type attitude? So believe me, I'm bewildered I'm just wondering who's getting paid to pull this maneuver off.
Well, like I said, the way it's being presented, I mean, it's been nonstop ever since I started the show. Fox News has not reported on anything else at all except this. So, yeah, this is a hard sell, and it does feel like another Sandy Hook to me. And it's just endless replays and endless replays. And, yeah, this is the beginning of another push to suspend the Second Amendment. And as I mentioned earlier, somebody wrote in a letter over at InfoWars. There's all these new accounts there signed up, repeal the Second Amendment now. Okay? I guess we lost Francis. All right, let's see. We're getting back here to near the end of the show. Apparently, central banks now own 33% of all global sovereign debt, and Moody's is threatening a U.S. credit downgrade. That will have major repercussions. All right, getting on back to Florida. Everybody wants to talk about Florida. Apparently, half of the media is reporting there was a scheduled fire alarm evacuation drill, and others are saying, no, the shooter tripped the alarm himself. A third report is saying that teachers hit the fire alarm to get the kids out of the school as quickly as possible, which sort of goes against the shelter-in-place situation. I was looking for any possible gang affiliations that this shooter might have, because we know there's a lot of friction between different gangs and refugees and immigrants down there in Florida. But I'm still unable to determine if he's actually a born citizen or if he came in through our open immigration borders. Okay, there we are. All right, moving on here. Let's see. 17 dead. That's terrible. That is absolutely tragic. But again, the way they're just pounding on this and harping on it, it feels like another Sandy Hook. It's another gun grabber staged event. And, you know, it's funny. For all the gun grabbers saying that they're against gun violence, it looks like they're willing to just kill as many people as it takes to stampede us all into surrendering our weapons and our freedom. All righty. Before I forget to mention it, John Stadmiller will have Cody Snodgrass, a Black Ops whistleblower, as his guest today. And that, of course, starts immediately as soon as my show is over. We're going to go back to the phones here. Jeff in Georgia. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Michael, how you doing? I was calling about that massacre. You're mentioning carrying guns and all that. You know, all that's well and good, but Michael, we have to employ these young people. You know, I've called in before about that. We have to overthrow that banking system and use that capital to employ these young people. When you were young and I was young, you know, jobs were out there. You know, we were occupied.
Yes.
That no longer exists. You got these young people that are idle, and you know, arming the country is not going to change the system. The system has to change. You have to end the welfare system and create jobs, and you have to overthrow the banking system.
Well, hang on a second. I want to back up here a little bit. You're absolutely right. When we were young, there were jobs out there. And when we were in school, we knew we had to study because there would be a job out there. But these young people are in school and they're looking at the economy and they already know there's no job out there for them. And so they don't have the incentive to study hard. That, again, combined with the fact that there's very little parental nurturing because both parents are now working, sometimes 2 or 3 jobs. And it really is a sign of the rot and the deterioration. Now, I know that you want to overthrow the banking system. You keep calling in and talking about that. But again, my position is I don't feel this country is ready for violence in the streets. And I don't want to see it happen. And I think this idea of gun safety exists independently of the banking system. All I'm saying is let's go back to what worked before. Everybody gets a gun on their 12th birthday. They're taught gun safety. They're taught to respect the weapons. Everybody is armed. You're not going to have a mass shooting. The Jesus Cruz walked into that school knowing that there was nobody there who was going to shoot back at him.
Michael, the first political candidate, he could call himself, I'm of the Reform Party, and I'm going to cancel the federal debt, and I'm going to end the welfare system, and I'm going to employ all these millions of youth, black, brown, yellow, white. You know, he's going to revolutionize the political system. We're here now.
Employ them as what? What are you going to? What jobs?
I would use the government as a facilitator to try to augment the private sector like they do in Europe, or if the government has to create the programs they did under Roosevelt, that's fine also.
Mm-hmm.
But people have to work. That's the natural state of man.
I'm not sure I agree with that last one. I mean, anthropologists have shown that back during caveman times, it only took about 4 hours a day to get enough food to feed your family, and the rest of the time you just hung out with your kids and had fun. This idea of an 8-hour, 10-hour workday, again, is so that our masters can harvest off the work product. And I think there is a better way for humans to be living. We're not going to get there as long as there are money junkies in the world. Anyway, listen, Jeff, I need to let you go. We got to take a break for commercials, and we'll be back with another caller and the end of our show after these few words. Well, they're already out there waving around the AR-15 as the villain here, but I'm looking at some of the stuff this De Jesus Cruz was putting on social media. It's very obvious that this kid had a problem. The school knew there was a problem. Somebody should have been paying attention to this guy here. My question is now, looking at some of the bizarre things that he was writing in social media, was he on prescription antidepressants? That's the question that I would want to ask right now. Because remember, in schools, you know, if you start acting out, what do? They give you prescription antidepressants. All right, let's take a couple of phone calls here. Kevin in West Virginia, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mr. Mike. I called in I guess it was last week, and was talking about my dad getting hit for $1,500 for credit card fraud.
Yes.
What turned out, it's these card skimmers.
Yes.
I don't know if I know you're aware of card skimmers.
Yes.
They're putting these skimmers on the gas pumps, and they're getting people that way. And apparently there's an app you can get to detect these skimmers. Well, a couple questions that I have is, once you detect one of these skimmers, what's the next step do you do? Like, say you pull up to a gas station and you pull out your phone and your app says there's a skimmer on it, and then you look on the side and the seal of the gas pump's broken, and think there's a skimmer there. Well, what do you do? What's the next step from that?
Well, you inform the owner of the gas station, and then you call the police.
Okay. I was just curious, is there something we can do to catch these? Is this a countrywide phenomenon that's going around?
It's actually global now. It's global now. And the First Hawaiian Bank, though, they've come up with a design for the automated teller machine where the slot where you put the card is this whole curly-Q, curved, clear, green plastic so you can see through it. And verify that there is no skimmer. It's a very, very, very clever design. Anyway, listen, Kevin, we're going to let you go, and I'm going to try and jam one final call in here from Will in Cincinnati. Aloha, Will. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. Good to talk to you. Quick comment about the shooting today. I heard Sean Hannity reported that he did just a one-line mention. He said, apparently there was a drill there earlier today. I was listening in the radio in my truck, and I was just like, oh, God, here we go again. And also a lot was said about the FBI being there.
Yes.
I mean, almost immediately. And isn't that, Mike, a situation, does something have to cross state lines, or do they just automatically show up, or how does that go?
Well, yeah, technically, the local police can call in the FBI, or the FBI can come on in and say, you're going to call us in. But the fact that the FBI is there is one reason why I think this may be another one of these gun grabber false flag shootings, because the police knew who the suspect was. They had him arrested. They had him in the hospital. Now he's in the sheriff's lockup. There was no need for the FBI to be there unless the FBI is there to try and sanitize the scene and get rid of any evidence that says this shooting is as phony as the one that was at the Mandalay Bay or Sandy Hook or Columbine or any of these other gun grabber theatrical presentations that we've had to live through and die through. Okay.
Another weird thing.
Will, I got to let you go. Yeah, we're out of time. I'm absolutely sorry here. Thank you very much for the phone call. Stay tuned for John Stodmiller. Again, he's got Cody Snodgrass as a guest. Please take what you learn here, share it with everybody. And again, anything that you can do to help Republic Broadcasting and whatreallyhappened.com, we're really in a tremendous state of need right now. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.